Our speakers today are Dr. Meeks and Sandy Davenport, and they will be talking about bail reform that they would like to put before the legislation. I will let them go into details on who they are and what their program is about. Dr. Meeks, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to push some buttons here to share my screen in hopes that you all can see that. I can't see you all, so I'm hopeful that you all can see the screen. First of all, I would just like to say thank you so much to Green Valley Democrats for inviting us and allowing us to share our legislation and share our concerns with you and to encourage you to support this. My name is Cherie Meeks, and I serve as the president of NAACP here in Tucson. And I have with me Sandy Davenport. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I've been active with the Tucson NAACP for the last 3 years, and particularly with the Criminal Justice Committee, and I'm also the chair of the subcommittee on bail reform. And I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Wonderful. So thank you all again for this invitation. We truly appreciate it. Before we jump in, I do want to share a little bit of information about the NAACP and share with you our mission. And our mission is to achieve equity, political rights, and social inclusion by advancing policies and practices that expand human and civil rights, eliminate discrimination, and accelerate the well-being, education, and economic security of Black people and all people of color. To make this a reality, we are committed to actionable strategies to dismantle or remove barriers that perpetuate oppressive practices and race-based discrimination. So it is our intention to inform the public of the adverse effects of racial discrimination. And so with this approximately 30-minute presentation, we see this as an opportunity to share with you all the impact of cash bail on communities of color and communities that experience poverty. We are also committed to working to address intersectional patterns of oppression. We work to be free from all discrimination. So let me start with a little bit of background information. Our current efforts focused on addressing the problems of cash bail in the state of Arizona. In 2016, the Arizona Supreme Court Task Force on Fair Justice for All recommended eliminating cash bail via constitutional amendment. The task force believes Arizona should strive to eliminate money for freedom and shift to a risk-based system. In 2022, we worked to turn this into law, but were blocked in the state legislature. In 2017, at our national convention, our organization adopted a resolution to support bail reform. This was reaffirmed in 2019 and reaffirmed most recently in 2022. The NAACP seeks to ensure that no person accused of crime is held in custody simply because they do not have capital or access to capital. Branches are working across the country to impact bail reform in meaningful ways. Some states have begun attempts to reform their cash bail systems, but there still continues to be a large degree of inconsistency, both in method and application of bail reform policies. So here in Arizona, our Tucson branch has prepared a report and recommendation on cash bail document that is also supported by our state conference, and we can certainly share that information with you all. But first, let's be clear on what we are talking about. What do we mean when we say cash bail? Is that the same thing as money bail? We are using these terms, cash bail and money bail, interchangeably. It is money that is paid as a condition of pretrial release to get out of jail after arrest, but before conviction. We also know that historically, cash bail was intended to ensure that individuals facing charges would in fact return for trial or hearing. But research has demonstrated that bail is not necessary to ensure court appearance. Other conditions of release that are less punitive and less restrictive can support successful return for court appearances by people who have been arrested. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the problem, and I'll turn it over to Sandy Davenport.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you on the urgent need for correcting problems in pretrial detention in Arizona. We appreciate your attention to these important issues, and we hope to prepare you to discuss this topic and our legislative recommendations with others, and to join us in urging our legislators to vote for changing the cash bail system in Arizona. The NAACP works for equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. Mass incarceration disproportionately targets and locks up people of color and members of the LGBTQI community, even for offenses as minor as shoplifting a hot dog. Cash bail is the front door to mass incarceration. Therefore, we at the Arizona NAACP have worked over the past years to study the broken system of cash bail. We've created a detailed report to explain why we are proposing legislation to make major changes to that system. We want to fix the system which criminalizes poverty, locks up people who cannot pay bail, despite their having only been arrested for nonviolent offenses, and yet allows some who strong evidence shows have done violent crimes to buy their way out of detention. Next slide, please. So what is the problem? The cash bail system is broken. Some individuals arrested for first-degree murder and sexual assault. I think we need to go back a slide. Yeah. Some individuals arrested for first-degree murder and sexual assault who are likely to be sentenced to decades in prison if convicted, are able to pay bail and buy their release from jail until their trial. Although their behavior poses a serious public safety risk to the community, if they or their associates have the financial means, they are not held in jail. This is a serious public safety risk that has, in some instances, tragically resulted in additional victims in the community being assaulted and even killed.
The pandemic is causing its own plague of problems within the criminal justice system. As courts backlog, more and more violent criminals are being released while they wait, putting them back in our communities and threatening your safety. Of course, Nylander looks into some of these startling stories in tonight's News 4 Tucson investigation.
We've seen criminals with a long rap sheet get released and go on to kill law enforcement officers, school teachers right here in Tucson. And for the victims' families left behind, they can't help but feel things were preventable. Diana Garaventa just had her first birthday without her son, David Anderson.
He would have been calling me. I just want him back, and I want him to be able to do all the amazing things he was getting ready to do.
David, a 30-year-old ninth grade English teacher in Tucson, was shot in the back and killed May 1st while on a routine walk through his neighborhood. It remains a mystery why he was shot.
At the wrong place at the wrong time, because it was daylight and early evening, and I don't know. They don't really know.
Police arresting 18-year-old Maurice Diaz-Casales a few days after the shooting, charged with first-degree murder. But a look at his criminal history has Diana angry and wondering why Diaz-Casales was ever released from jail. The News 4 Tucson investigators found Diaz-Casales was indicted last year on dozens of felony charges, including multiple counts of armed robbery, burglary, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and kidnapping. Investigators say he was captured in New Mexico and brought back to Tucson, where his bond was set at $100,000. He was later released to pretrial services.
And somehow he still was released. And within 90 days, not even 3 months after he left, my son died. And that's not right.
Earlier this month, DEA agent Michael Garbo was shot and killed on an Amtrak train during a drug interdiction operation. Investigators say the suspected shooter killed by return fire is Darian Taylor, a felon with a violent history out of Oakland, California, who was able to post a $255,000 bail after assaulting a police officer and trying to take their weapon while already facing a warrant for aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, shooting into a dwelling, and cruelty to a child.
Judges have decided to let people that we normally wouldn't let out of custody. As a result of that, we've seen where those individuals have traveled to other neighboring states like Arizona and then committed much more serious crimes in those jurisdictions.
In August, there was also a shooting on an Amtrak platform in Chicago. The shooter, a man wanted for murder, also out of Alameda County, California. Sergeant Raymond Kelly with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office says violent criminals being released and reoffending has become too normal.
And we've had people leave our jail, and within 10 minutes of leaving our jail, go out and carjack people.
In Maricopa County earlier this month, Sheriff's Deputy Juan Reese was beaten to death while booking Clinton Hurley for violating parole. He has a history of several felonies, including attempted child molestation.
The cash system that we are stuck with by law in Arizona is frustrating.
Pima County Attorney Laura Conover says her office wants to change the cash bail system, but can't by Arizona law. She believes it allows dangerous felons who can afford to make bail able to get out, while those with perhaps a less violent background, who are poor, left in jail.
It's just failing us on both ends of the spectrum. And I will say that statistically, the problem is we have hundreds of people in the jail who shouldn't be because the cash system criminalizes poverty.
Diana agrees the current system is broken, but she's more concerned about how dangerous criminals will be kept behind bars.
We can't hold criminals, especially violent, physically violent criminals, in jail pending trials. There's no point in arresting them to begin with.
Diaz Casales is now being held without bond. Tucson this year broke its homicide rate with the highest on record with more than 80. Investigating for you, Cor Snylander, News 4 Tucson.
So, meanwhile, many more individuals arrested for nonviolent crimes such as shoplifting, trespassing, or drug possession are stuck in jail awaiting their trials due to lack of funds to pay bail, serving weeks, even months of time incarcerated, sometimes losing their jobs and housing, even though their sentence, if ultimately convicted, would be to probation, not incarceration. According to a report in the Bureau of Justice Statistics, in 2019, about 65% of jail inmates were held in pretrial detention with no conviction, awaiting court action. The money bail system keeps poor people locked up due to inability to pay. The majority of Americans cannot come up with $400 in an emergency. In Pima County, the average bail is set at over $2,000, well beyond the reach of so many. On any given day, there are likely to be approximately 200 people in the Pima County Jail awaiting trial on misdemeanors for which they would likely be given probation, not prison or jail time if convicted. These people are sitting in jail only because they are unable to pay bail imposed on them as a condition of pretrial release. And detention, even very brief, that is not necessary to protect public safety, but due to inability to pay, results in harm to those incarcerated and their families in areas of health, employment, increased recidivism, disrupted and displaced families, and damage to community well-being, and is therefore costly to society. Disparities in the effects of the cash bail system may be due to poverty or to race, ethnicity, or membership in other marginalized groups such as the LGBTQI community, people with mental illness or substance use disorder, and people who are unhoused. As with other aspects of the criminal justice system, Black, Indigenous, other people of color, and those of Latinx ethnicity experience disproportionate effects from the cash bail system. Quoting the Vera Institute of Justice in 2020, Black people are hit the hardest. Systemic inequality begets the Black-white wealth gap, where Black families are far less likely to have money for bail. That inequity is compounded by the potential for racism and disparate treatment by prosecutors and judges in the bail decision itself. Studies that compare the cases of Black and white people facing similar charges and with similar histories of criminal justice involvement find that bail is routinely set significantly higher for Black people than their white counterparts, unquote. This is not necessarily due to intentional racism. Often it is due to unconscious bias or implicit bias built into the system in the way that risk is assessed. The Public Safety Assessment, or PSA, used by many states, including Arizona, to assess a person's risk pre-trial, regarding risk of flight and perceived dangerousness has been shown to contribute to racial disparities in pretrial jail populations, likely due to the PSA's heavy weighting of prior criminal history, as Blacks have been disproportionately targeted for arrests, even for nonviolent minor offenses such as trespassing, shoplifting food, or simple possession of drugs for personal use. The Hispanic population of Arizona is 37%, but 60% of the people in prison for marijuana possession are Hispanic. Black people, on average, receive the longest prison sentences in Arizona, 62 months as opposed to 54 months for white people. This is from the Arizona Profile Prison Policy Initiative of the League of Women Voters of Arizona in 2021. Recently, the percent of African Americans in the Pima County Jail has been running at about 3 times the percent in the community. Several recent studies, cited in the Hamilton Project article in 2018, find that pre-trial detention leads to a higher likelihood of conviction driven by an increased likelihood of pleading guilty. Pleading guilty in order to get out of jail. And people who are in detention at the time of trial are more likely to be convicted and get longer sentences. Dr. Meeks will discuss the costs further. Next slide.
So, of course, there are costs associated with detaining people. Detaining people in jail leads to enormous costs for law enforcement, for courts, for administration, and certainly for you and I as taxpayers. The average pretrial length of stay was 22 days in 2020 in Pima County, at a cost in our county of $141 per day for every person in jail. That comes to a total of over $3,100 for the average person's stay in jail at the taxpayer's expense. There are other ways that we can incorporate to ensure that individuals who are arrested show up for their future court dates instead of caging them in jail. Perhaps electronic monitoring, if needed, costs only $11 per day. In our county, a woman was held for 45 days in jail, awaiting her court appearance because she could not pay her bail. Her crime? She shoplifted a candy bar. She was dealing with mental health issues before incarceration, likely also aggravated by being locked up for a month and a half. When she finally did come before the judge's only condition of her release was that she connect with the mental health services offered. So money saved from reducing the number of people in jail before trial can be used to pay for the services that those people need while they await their trials outside the jail in the community. Some of these things may include housing for the unhoused, transportation, and counseling. These services will help the individuals themselves as well as their families and will also help reduce their recidivism. So we've got a solution. Our solution is to pass the 2023 Safer Communities, Secure Families, Pretrial Justice for All Act, which is HB 2398. This bill contains legislative amendments to 2 Arizona statutes to protect public safety, decriminalize poverty, and prevent our jails from being stuffed with people who should not be there. So here's what our legislation will do. For Safer Communities, our proposal will provide that a person arrested for a violent felony crime whose behavior is demonstrated by clear and convincing evidence to pose an ongoing danger to the community can be held in jail until their trial and no longer be able to buy their way out of jail and back to the community by paying money bail. For secure families, our proposal will stop disrupting families by preventing people from being jailed before their trial when they are presumed innocent if the only thing they are accused of is a low-level misdemeanor for which they would likely only get probation, which is community supervision, not incarceration, if they were convicted. Other conditions of release instead of pretrial incarceration can allow them to keep their jobs, support families, reduce recidivism, enhance their return for the court appearance, and possibly link them with the needed treatment and other resources so that they can be successful. For pretrial justice for all, our proposal ensures pretrial justice and fairness for the accused who are entitled to the presumption of innocence. The proposal requires a judge to assess ability to pay before assigning bail and work to avoid implicit bias, though attention to racial and ethnic disparities that historically have negatively affected communities of color. Our proposal is right on crime and will save taxpayer dollars as well. So we have taken action. We are holding these community informational sessions to increase awareness of the issue and provide data regarding the impact of cash bail. We're happy to share our report, which contains extensive background information that details the realities and negative consequences of the current pretrial system. Careful review of research on cash bail demonstrates how to avoid problems other states have faced. There have been successes. New York State prohibited cash bail for most misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. Illinois totally abolished cash bail in 2021. New Jersey got rid of cash bail and reduced the number of those detained pre-trial by 44%. New Mexico passed a constitutional amendment that no one can be detained due to inability to pay. We recognize, recent attacks on bail reform as causing increased crime are in large part, disingenuous, as crimes rose during the pandemic with or without bail reform and are now falling. Most of the jurisdictions where reforms are heavily critiqued involve the problem of releasing violent felons. Our proposal addresses and eliminates that problem. We have incorporated lessons learned into our proposal to eliminate cash bail, and in the coming this current legislative session, we're asking for that change to eliminate the option for bail in all misdemeanor cases and to require the judge to determine a person's ability to pay before assessing bail in other cases. Under the NAACP proposal, judges will retain discretion to hold in jail those whose behavior poses a high risk to public safety and set conditions of release for the rest as alternatives to incarceration and bail. We must stop confining people simply due to poverty. Only the least restrictive conditions of release necessary to still protect public safety should be required. We want to highlight some of our successes very quickly. We have persuaded a group of bipartisan state legislators led by Representative Alma Hernandez to introduce our proposal, which we have done. We currently have some supporters, individuals, and organizations. The Pima County Board of Supervisors has voted to support our legislation, as well as the Pima County Sheriff and prosecutors who also support our proposed legislation. Though our previous, more expansive proposal was voted down last year on partisan lines in the Arizona House Judiciary Committee, we are committed to try for passage of our revised, more modest bipartisan proposal in this current legislative session. And that is House Bill 2398. If you get nothing else from this, know that we do not give up. Cash bail is the front door to mass incarceration, creating a type of a debtor's prison. The purpose of incarceration should be to keep the community safe, not to punish those who lack means. The current system both endangers public safety and criminalizes poverty.
So, to wrap up, we want to ask you to help us stop the use of money bail to determine who goes to jail and who goes free in Arizona. We want to end the trauma of incarceration due to poverty for people charged with misdemeanors and their families. Please join us and others throughout Arizona to reach out to your state legislators for support to change the law by being prepared to make calls and send emails during this legislative session, and ask your family members, friends, and networks to do the same. This can make all the difference. We also invite you to sign up for requests to speak if you haven't done so already. This allows you to leave comments and oppose or support bills. in a public way that is viewed by the legislators. Dr. Meeks is adding, are you going to add the links to the chat to sign up for the Community Engagement Beyond Voting or League of Women Voters? They are the vehicles through which you can sign up to get a RTS account. If you are willing to be contacted with action alerts about this, please provide your email address for this purpose. Please place it in the chat. And next slide. We also invite you to join the NAACP. And so we put up the link for the Tucson area chapter or branch. Help us continue the fight for equality and the end to discrimination in the criminal justice system and all aspects of life. I want to thank you for your attention and for caring about this issue. Dr. Meeks, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add. I will stop sharing so that I am able to drop those links in the chat. I know that does not reach the people who are there in person, so we can make sure to share the information with you all as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Our audience in here would like to give you an applause, so thank you.
You're most welcome.
A couple quick questions. Now that we have a Democratic Attorney General, would she have any influence on changing any of these laws or superimposing or enforcing them differently? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, and you want to do that? Or?
No, I was saying I didn't hear that, but if you did, please answer.
Yeah, that's it. You're asking about the Democratic Attorney General and whether she might have influence in applying the law differently or helping to pass the changes that we want for the statutes. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the only way that she can have influence is I would guess that her office is somewhat limited in terms of trying to influence legislators about legislation. Whatever she can do, we would certainly appreciate. But the statutes themselves would have to be changed in order for the law to be different and to be differently applied. Currently, the judges do have the discretion to keep people in jail pre-trial if there's evidence of violence and danger to the community, but they do not always use that. And so that's led to release of folks that are a strong risk to the community and go on to commit further violence. And I don't think that the Attorney General has anything specific to do about this statewide.
Andy, you has the question? Just talk loud. You'll be okay. Okay. She was asking, when you go before a judge, is there a worksheet or is it all biased based on the judge's own criteria?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is the pretrial safety assessment, the PSA, to assess risk. There's also the pretrial services as their format to assess risk. But there's been some issues with that in terms of people being released to, quote, to pretrial services. And that is not a secure release if these are people that are violent and in danger to the community. And so that's where the judges have not exercised the judgment necessary, really, to keep the community safe in all cases.
She was referring to on domestic cases where sometimes criminals are released right back to the public, where they affect the family, the victim, as well as the children. I'm assuming this is one of the things that you're trying to clear up for judges?
Yes. Dr. Meeks, do you want to respond? The domestic violence issue is different And
Yeah, so I had some things written down, so I want to read this as it is, which I'm hopeful it will get to um, what you might be asking. You know, we are persuaded that pretrial electronic monitoring with geofencing and the requirement to live in approved housing away from the victim is better than pretrial incarceration in cases involving domestic violence. This allows that alleged perpetrator to continue employment and financial support for the family, which we hope will reduce the frequency of victims changing their testimony and recanting while undermining, you know, the ability to obtain accountability. And if convicted, these individuals will receive probation, which is monitoring in the community, so they are released with required anger management counseling. They generally will not be jailed following conviction. And so because we know in many cases, you know, they're likely to be released at some point, we believe that the electronic monitoring with geofencing avoids triggering PTSD from, you know, which they may be suffering, or allows them to continue to work and to support their family, but does require them to be away from their victims.
And just to continue with that, misdemeanor domestic violence cases do not involve serious physical injury to a victim and are first or second time offenses. By contrast, felony domestic violence cases may give rise to pretrial detention because they involve physical injury or third or more repetitive offenses. And pretrial detention in those cases may be appropriate and necessary to protect the victim. And the judges have the discretion to do that without offering the option of buying one's way out on bail.
Okay, kind of to follow up on that, same question, when these ankle monitors are used, how closely are they monitored when a victim has a restraining order against this person? Are they monitored so law enforcement can follow them to keep them at bay to victims? And is that done by the sheriff's department or the county or the city?
They would be monitored. I don't think there would be a delay in a response. So it is 24-hour monitoring. The sheriff's department would be notified, and we've discussed this with the sheriff and know that you know, they are in support of electronic monitoring as well. And so we believe that this is a way to keep people in the community so that it is not disrupting their families. But of course, we want to keep the folks who, you know, may have had an encounter with the individual, keep them safe. And so this is constant monitoring.
We were wanting to know, what is the Republican stand in the legislature to keep this bill from moving forward? Do you know? And I guess the other question is, where is the bill within the system? Is it still in committee this year, or when we start the request to speak, where do we start?
Yeah, I could answer that. Right now, it's been assigned to the House Judiciary and the House Rules Committee. There has not been a hearing set. However, if you go into RTS, still through your bill positions, you can put your name as a supporter of the bill. And just to let you know what happened last year when we were trying for the constitutional amendment, the bill was voted down on partisan lines, and the only person that got up to speak against the bill was a representative of the bail bond industry, which makes about $2 billion a year nationwide on profiteering, really off of the backs of people that can't afford to pay their own bail. So that's one influence, and actually the bail bond industry has been very influential in designing and pushing legislation to maintain bail systems, because that's how they make their money. So we don't know if we can get support, but we are, like Sheriff Daniels in Cochise County, we have various law enforcement, and we're working to try and get a hearing on this. And if so, then we will be up there testifying and trying to get it through.
I know that COVID restrictions early or last year hampered the amount of trial that were going on. Do you know, has this been relieved, and are we getting more trials for people that are having to wait 8 months to have a simple trial on candy stealing?
So, don't know the actual statistics, but there's been, people are still sometimes having to wait weeks and months in pretrial detention before their court hearing happens, and they have various processes about how they get assigned their legal representatives and the delays involved. So it can still be a very lengthy stay, even though the person is presumed innocent.
The other question I had has to do with constantly being in the system, doing a violent. All right, in that process, is that hot state of Arizona? Do we see that as part of the problem of the bail bond reforms?
Recidivism, you're talking about people going back in?
Yes, constantly returning to the over and over. Yep.
Well, the bail system actually contributes to that because when people are in jail, they are learning various tricks of the trade sometimes, and it's increasing criminalization. It's also a situation where those that are in jail at the time of their hearing and they're wearing the jail outfit, they are much more likely to get a longer sentence. And because their home life and work life and cars and children and everything has been disrupted, they are at higher risk for lacking the supports they need to be functioning productively in the community and more likely to go back to crimes to feed themselves or try and get some income of some kind. So, this bail issue definitely affects recidivism in a negative way, as it is standing today.
Is there any way that a petition could be started to change this constitutionally?
Well, what we tried last year was to change the Constitution itself to say no cash bail at all. And if that had passed through the legislature, then that would have gone to the voters on the ballot. The petitioning process is very involved, as you know, in terms of the amount of work and money and effort that goes into trying to get it. But, if it doesn't get through as a statutory change this year, then that might be a possibility down the line.
We love to sign petitions here in Green Valley, so yeah, we will make sure if it shows up, we're going to make sure it's on our plate. Anybody else have any other questions? Question was, are there any crimes that no bail should be offered at all?
The most violent ones, murder, sexual assault, child abuse, various ones that place the community at high risk if the person is released before their court date.
Well, we are set up to do training here on request to speak, so we want to make sure that remind people on January the 16th, we will be having training right here in our headquarters, our location. February 16th. We missed the January date, didn't we? February the 16th at 1:30 right here in headquarters. So if you please go online, our link is on our website, greenvalleydemocrats.org. And so please sign up to get an account and be a part. I can see how this is very important, especially for you. I would once again like to thank you, Dr. Meeks, Sandy. Thank you very much for a great presentation. And we look forward to this constitutional vote soon.
You're most welcome, and thanks for inviting us. And if you can please let us know how many folks are in our audience. We'd like to know that too.
We will be in touch. Please keep in touch with us. Thank you both very much.
Thank you so
Have a
much
great
for your
day.
time.
Thank you.